This video is sponsored by MPB, which is where I bought this used Nikon D200 DSLR boxed and in great condition for just £85, or around $100 US. In this video, I'll tell you the story behind this classic DSLR and why it's one of the best options at this price point, whether you're a beginner, a student, or an enthusiast. The D200 was Nikon's second DSLR in a series aimed at the semi-professional market. These bodies delivered a step up over the more consumer-focused double-digit models like the D70 or D80, and a taste of the single-digit pro bodies like the D1 or D2, but without their cost or heft. The D200 launched in late 2005, just before YouTube arrived, which is why I never made a video about it on my main channel. But I do remember writing a review for my Camera Labs website and being very impressed by the overall handling and quality. At the time it cost around $1,700 or £1,300 and debuted a new 10 megapixel CCD sensor in the cropped APS-C format, and almost 2 decades later this has become one of the most appealing aspects for collectors. This CCD sensor technology, coupled with the colour filter array and the image processing, delivers really attractive images with quite a unique look compared to modern cameras that some people find very appealing. The same sensor would be used again in the more affordable D80 around 6 months later, but both models represented the last of their kind from Nikon before the company switched to CMOS technology for the D300 and D90 onwards. This is what makes the D80 and the tougher D200 very attractive today, and bargains can be had on the used market. When shopping for used cameras, my first port of call is always MPB, the sponsor of this video, where I found a few D200s from as little as £65 depending on condition and their shutter count. I went for one closer to £85 for its lower shutter count, and I'm quoting pounds as I'm based in the UK, but MPB also operates across Europe and the US. I really appreciate their photos showing the condition of each product they sell, along with the shutter count and a guarantee that it's actually working, and in the case of this model supplied with a battery, a charger, and in all cases a 6-month warranty too. This eliminates the gamble of buying an untested used model without a working battery or charger and no chance to return it. I also ordered a Nikon DX35mm 1.8 lens to go with it, costing roughly the same again. Both arrived quickly and in a well-packaged box. As described, the D200 came with the original packaging and the camera itself was in great condition with no peeling on the grip. Meanwhile, the lens looked as if it was almost new. MPB is the largest global platform for used photo and video gear, recirculating over 500,000 cameras, lenses and accessories every year. So whether you're looking for a used bargain, like the D200, or perhaps selling some gear that you don't need anymore, head on over to their website at mpb.com or using the links in the description. Right, now let's see what this camera can do and why you'd want it in the present day. The D200 may be the best part of 2 decades old now, but there's no denying it remains a serious bit of kit. The moment you first pick it up, you know you're handling a higher end body, with the magnesium alloy shell making it feel more like a Pro D2 as opposed to the plastic bodies of consumer models, not to mention the previous D100. Unlike the higher end bodies, the D200's grip featured a considerate hooked inner area providing greater security and comfort. Sure, the D200 is a bit heavier than the D100 as a result of its tougher build, but it's far superior in your hands. Anyone familiar with Nikon cameras, new or old, will feel immediately at home with the control layout. Most settings are adjusted by holding a button down and turning either the thumb or finger dials. But unlike many of its rivals, key controls have buttons dedicated entirely to them, including the image quality, ISO sensitivity and white balance settings. And where many cameras bury other settings within menus or require multiple key presses, Nikon has applied its traditional physical approach of dedicated switches and dials. Like the D2X, the drive modes are quickly and easily selected using a dial on the upper left surface. The focusing and metering modes both have small switches on the back, and all of the buttons are a decent size, allowing easier operation while wearing gloves. And again, following traditional pro bodies, there's no mode dial on the upper right side, with the D200 instead opting for a mode button, which when pushed down, cycles through program, manual, aperture and shutter priority using the thumb dial. There's no other modes available. Shutter speeds range from 0.008 of a second to 30 seconds plus bulb, while the fastest flash sync speed is 250th of a second, and these top speeds are faster than the D100. In the absence of a mode dial, the upper right surface is instead almost entirely dominated by a large LCD screen, which displays a wealth of shooting details at a glance, including a more accurate battery indicator and even a graphical indication of the 11-point AF system. Twisting the power collar clockwise illuminates it with a greenish light. Composition is using an optical SLR viewfinder with 95% coverage and a very respectable 0.94 times magnification, which delivers a bigger image than the earlier D100. Through the viewfinder you can see the 11-point AF system, indicated by black LCD graphics which completely disappear when not active. In single AF area mode you can adjust the position using the 8-way joypad controller on the rear, while also seeing the position reflected on that top LCD screen again. By using an LCD focusing screen, the D200 is also able to have other on-demand graphics, like being able to switch on or off an optional 4x4 grid for alignment. I love this feature when other cameras would force you to swap actual focusing screens, and even then only on models where that's even possible. It's also used to display a variety of warnings, including a black and white icon in the corner of the viewfinder when the image parameter is set to monochrome, so there'll be no nasty surprises. Meanwhile, running underneath the view are the key shooting details, including the metering mode, the shutter speed, aperture, white balance, ISO and shots remaining. Meanwhile, the main colour screen on the rear is both larger and more detailed than its predecessor, a 2.5-inch panel with 230K pixels that delivers sharply defined fonts in the menus and plenty of details in playback. Speaking of playback, you can also configure the camera to display a number of additional pages showing the active focusing area, the shooting details, RGB histograms, flashing saturated highlights, or a simple large brightness histogram. Unlike many Nikon bodies, the D200 is also supplied with a protective cover that clips over the screen. But remember, you can't use it for live view as this was not yet available on a Nikon DSLR. On the left side of the body you'll find most of the connectivity, starting with a PC sync port for external lighting at the top. Below this, behind a large rubber flap, are a 3.5mm composite video output for TV slideshows and a DC input for mains power. Then behind its own flap at the bottom is a mini USB 2 port. Note back then the USB ports were for data transfer only or remote control, effectively turning the camera into a card reader, and they could not be used to charge the battery. Meanwhile, on the front surface below the logo is a 10-pin remote terminal which supports the MC35 GPS adapter, allowing you to embed location data into the EXIF header. Meanwhile, the optional WT3 transmitter will equip the D200 with Wi-Fi capabilities, and it's revealing to note that this and the GPS support only came to Canon's equivalent series with their WFT E3A grip for the EOS 40D in 2008. And as you'd expect, there's a fully featured hot shoe on the top, and in a nice bonus over the D2X Pro body, a pop-up flash for easy fills. Twisting a lock control on the rear springs open the memory card compartment on the grip side with a single compact flash slot. This will accommodate standard Type 1 or thicker Type 2 cards, and also supports FAT32 formatting for capacities larger than 2GB. Dual slots would however have to wait for later models. I successfully used the D200 with a Lexar 2GB Pro card which can be read in an optional CF card reader or direct from the camera over USB. On the underside of the camera you'll find a centrally positioned tripod thread with a generous rubber surround alongside the battery compartment. The D200 is powered by the EN-EL3E pack, a slightly modified version of the D100's battery, presumably to drive the more accurate battery indicator. This does however mean that it's not compatible with the older EN-EL3 or EL3A packs though. Like other DSLRs of this era, the battery is charged externally using the AC-powered MH18A, and that's supplied with the D200. So if you want to charge your battery, make sure you've got this as well. The F-mount means the D200 has access to a huge range of lenses, new and old, including support for the aperture rings on vintage AI and AIS lenses. Meanwhile, the APS-C sensor behind it, which Nikon refers to as DX format, reduces the field of view of any lens by 1.5 times. As mentioned earlier, I chose the Nikon DX35mm 1.8G for my tests, a compact high-quality lens with autofocus and a bright aperture that delivers roughly standard coverage on the DX sensor. Speaking of the sensor, the D200 marked the debut of a new 10.2 megapixel CCD sensor, a substantial boost over the 6 megapixels of the previous D100, and now coupled with a more accurate metering sensor too. The maximum image size measures 3872 by 2592 pixels, and that's enough to make a 13 by 9 inch print, or roughly A4 sized at 300 dpi. But note there is no video recording on this model, with that not arriving on DSLRs until the later D90. Images can be recorded at 3 different resolutions, each with a choice of 3 different JPEG compression levels, with best quality JPEGs typically measuring between 3 and 6 megabytes, with most working out around 4.5 to 5 meg each. Images can also be recorded in Nikon's NEF RAW format, either with or without compression, although the former does introduce minor losses. RAW files can be recorded with or without an accompanying JPEG at any of the quality settings. You've really got a lot of options here. Sensitivity is offered between 100 and 1600 ISO in 1/3 EV steps with 3 further extended options, H0.3, H0.7 and H1.0, corresponding to 2000, 2500 and 3200 ISO respectively. Let's now run through the sensitivities one stop at a time with the noise reduction set to the default normal. First here at 100 ISO, now at 200 ISO, next 400 ISO, then 800 ISO, 1600 ISO, and finally the H1.0 setting that's equivalent to 3200 ISO. As for dynamic range, here's a RAW file that I took with the D200 opened in the latest version of Adobe Camera Raw. You can see it's possible to retrieve quite a lot of highlight detail here in the sky, not to mention boosting those pesky shadows. Now you can't go crazy here, but there's certainly some latitude to play with. The D200 also offers multiple exposures and interval timer options, the latter particularly impressive when many cameras of this era required a separate accessory. The Nikon D200 sensor also features 4-channel output, which allows it to share the same image processing engine as the Pro level D2X, and this in turn means the D200 sports up to 5 frames per second bursts, a big improvement over the 3 frames per second of the D100, not to mention having a larger buffer too. Here's how it sounds shooting JPEGs at the top speed. With the quality set to large fine JPEG, I managed to capture 27 frames in 5.5 seconds before the buffer filled, so that works out at approximately 4.9 frames per second. And with the quality set to uncompressed RAW, I managed a respectable 21 frames in 4.5 seconds again before the buffer filled, and that works out at about 4.6 frames per second. In fact, the speed is close to that of the D2X, although that model also offers a faster 8 frames per second speed, albeit in an even more cropped mode. Fast forward to the present day and the D200 is an easy camera to get working. MPB supplied mine with an original EN EL3 battery pack in very good condition, not to mention the official mains charger to top it up, but as a popular battery pack, replacements and chargers from third parties should still be available. Meanwhile, by using compact flash memory, it's easy to find a working card for the D200, including large ones over 2 gig in size. And if you don't have a CF card reader, you can always use a mini USB cable to connect the camera directly to your computer and use that as a card reader instead. Right, now it's time to check out a bunch of photos that I took with the D200 in the present day, almost 2 decades after it was originally launched. Once again, I've got no movie clips for you as the D200 predates DSLRs with video recording capabilities. So let's check out some stills. Back in late 2005, it was clear that Nikon D200 meant serious business. It represented a substantial upgrade over the previous D100 across the board, from build to features and handling to image quality. It was fast, tough, and confidently delivered great looking images with minimal effort. As importantly, it more clearly defined what was becoming an increasingly popular semi-pro category, positioned comfortably between the entry-level and professional bodies in terms of price, overall heft and specification. Nikon's triple-digit series may have begun with the original D100, but it was the D200 which really set out its stall and showed what was possible, both now and going forward. And this in turn allowed the subsequent D300 and D300S to become even more powerful while consistently trumping Canon's double-digit EOS series in most aspects. In fact, it wasn't until Canon later split its line with the 7D that it really took on the triple-digit Nikons. I loved shooting with the D200 back in the mid-2000s, and almost 2 decades later it remains a joy to use. Sure, it lacks the live view and movie modes of later bodies, but that in turn allows it to concentrate on viewfinder-based stills photography alone, a pure approach backed up by a feature-packed, tough body packed with physical controls. And while the image quality is down to more than just its CCD sensor, there's no denying it still delivers great looking photos out of camera with plenty of detail to make pretty big prints if desired. The icing on the cake is the price. What originally cost around $1,700 or £1,300 can now be bought from MPB for less than $100 or pounds in great condition with a working battery, charger and a 6-month warranty. If you are looking for an enjoyable photographic experience on a tight budget of under $100 or pounds, the D200 is simply one of the best bodies you can go for. And if you can't find one, the D80 launched 6 months later is also a great choice, sharing the same sensor but in a lighter and simpler body. Since the used prices on both of these will actually be roughly similar, I'd sooner go for the more robust D200, but I still very much enjoyed retesting the D80 last year for my main Camera Labs channel, so check out that video if you're interested. And if you're not wedded to CCD technology, also consider the later D300, D300S or D90, and I actually made reviews of all of these when they came out in the murky past of my main channel. And that brings me to the end of this retro review, which only leaves me to ask you about your early digital camera memories in the comments, especially if you owned or lusted after one of these early DSLRs. And if you're tempted to invest in a vintage bargain, or perhaps sell some old gear that you're not using anymore, get yourself over to MPB using the links in the description. And a big thanks to them for sponsoring this video, and of course to you for watching it. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.